angel's song. On the slopes of the hills round about Bethlehem, shepherds used to keep their sheep, and on the very night when Mary and Joseph were toiling wearily along the road, thinking it very long and very hard, the shepherds were leading home their flocks. As the sun was setting, and as the sky was coloured all crimson and gold, the shepherds were standing by their sheepfolds, counting the sheep as they streamed in, to see that all were there, and all were safe. Soon the bright light died out of the sky, and then darkness came on. But still the shepherds did not leave their sheep. They stayed beside them all night through, for fear any harm might come to them in the darkness. And yet it was not really dark. There was the soft pale light of the stars, and there was the bright glow of the watchfire which the shepherds had lighted. They knew a nice cranny in the rocks which was sheltered from the wind, and there they sat round their bright gleaming fire and talked together. There was one shepherd who did not talk much. He sat apart from the others and looked as if he were listening all the time, and so he was, for he was on guard. It was his duty to listen for the slightest sound of danger, and then to warn the others. The shepherds round the fire were big, strong men. Their faces were burned brown with the sun and wind, but they had kind hearts and gentle hands. They talked of many things as they sat round that big campfire, but specially perhaps of the great crowds of people that had been coming into Bethlehem for some days past. They had noticed how weary some of the travellers were, and had wished that they could have helped them more. After a while, when everything was very still and quiet, they rolled themselves up in their thick cloaks and lay down to sleep. The sheepdogs too curled up and went to sleep. Only the shepherd on guard was left awake. Suddenly the red glow of the fire seemed to fade away. Quickly the shepherd on guard looked round, wondering what was wrong, and then he noticed a clear, bright light shining in the sky. He could not understand, for it was not nearly morning yet. The light shone brighter and brighter, until he began to be afraid. He turned to rouse the other shepherds, but the light had already wakened them from their sleep, and they were sitting up, looking round in great surprise. Still brighter and brighter grew the light. It was so bright that now all the shepherds were afraid to look upon it, and hid their faces, bending to the ground. Then through their fear they heard a voice speaking to them. It was a lovely voice, clear and deep like a bell, and yet full of gentleness and strength. "Fear not," it said, "for I bring you good news, which shall bring great joy to all people." That voice took away all the shepherds' fear, and now they raised their heads and looked upon that bright and shining light. As they gazed in wonder, the clear voice sounded forth again, like a great bell pealing out glad news. This is what it said: "Unto you is born this day in the city of Bethlehem a baby, who is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you: you shall find the child wrapped in baby clothes, and lying in a manger." The voice ceased, and the shepherds looked at each other in wonder and in joy. They could not speak. They could only gaze upon the bright white light that was shining all around them. Then it was that the youngest shepherd crept up to the oldest and whispered, "Look, in the light there, I can see a figure. Tell me, is it not the angel of the Lord?" "You are right, lad," whispered the old man. "Your eyes are better than mine, but now I too see the shining messenger of God." Then all at once the light grew brighter still, and the whole sky burst forth into song. The shepherds looked up, and there they saw the sky filled with a great host of the angels of heaven, all singing and praising God on high. Earth and sky were ringing with their music as they sang, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men." Over and over again the angels sang their song of gladness. Then the bright light began to fade, and the sweet singing sounded fainter and fainter. The shepherds gazed up into the sky, watching the white light until it disappeared, and listening to that sweet song until it could be heard no more. What a wonderful night this had been! For a while the shepherds scarcely dared to speak, and then at last they drew together and spoke in quiet whispers. The dogs and the sheep were quiet too, as if they knew that something wonderful had happened. "What do you think the angel said?" they asked one another, as if they almost feared to believe the great good news. But there was no mistake. The angel had said that in the little town of Bethlehem was born a baby who was Christ the Lord. "Let us make our way to Bethlehem," they said, "and see if we can find the babe." "Yes, let us go," they all said. "But first," said the oldest shepherd, "let us choose a lamb to take as a present to the child." With great care they chose the very best lamb out of all the flocks, and the oldest shepherd carried it very gently in his arms. As quickly as they could, they made their way down the hill slopes towards Bethlehem. They knew the way well, so they did not stumble, even though the light was very dim. At length they came to Bethlehem. The little town seemed fast asleep. There was not a light to be seen anywhere, and all was very quiet and still. "Where shall we look for the little child?" asked one of the shepherds. "Let us go to the inn and ask," said another. "Perhaps they will be able to tell us where to find him." Very quietly they went through the little town until they reached the inn. Everything was dark and still. The animals in the courtyard were all fast asleep. Nobody was moving about. Surely, the shepherds thought, the child cannot have been born here, or there would have been someone moving about, and they cannot know anything about it, or they would not be so sound asleep. We shall have to go and seek him in another place. They were just going to turn away, when one shepherd saw a little light far away across the courtyard. "Let us go and look in there," he said. Very softly the shepherds crossed the courtyard, and when they came to the light, they lifted the curtain over the doorway ever so gently, and then they just stood still and looked. For there, in the cold, bare stable, was Mary with Joseph at her side, and lying in the manger, all wrapped in his baby clothes, was the little child whose birth the angels of heaven had told forth. Very, very softly the shepherds stole in one by one, and when they came near the manger where the little child lay, they knelt down and bowed their heads as if they were in the presence of a king. Mary smiled upon them very sweetly, though she wondered how they knew to come and see her child. The oxen lowed as if they too were pleased, and when the little lamb baaed, the baby opened his eyes, as if to say thank you for the lovely present the kind shepherds had brought. After a little, the shepherds went away again, back to their sheepfolds on the hill, was great joy, and they made up their minds to tell everybody about the wonderful things they had seen and heard that night.